Well, hello, that's me again. Today is January 19th. It is Thursday, and we have a lot to talk about, obviously, because the media cycle is unstoppable and is non-stop, and the fodder, and especially in the West, to scare the shit out of people is pretty much non-stop. I mean, being fed non-stop into this meat, intellectual, so to speak, meat grinder. And for lay people, it is very difficult, obviously, to figure things out, especially when those things are being commented and fed towards those people by basically people who are themselves actually, which are primarily Western and some Russian so-called journalists, have their qualifications are those of the commenters onto some tabloid comment section on the internet. So basically, this is what we have, this vicious circle of people trying to basically over-dramatize what is happening, despite the fact that what is happening now, and if you have been involved into any kind of the serious planning and control of something very large, be that large corporation, let alone state, you should have seen that coming. But I received an email from one of my friends and supporters who is doctor of psychiatry actually, and he told me that basically I'm incorrect in terms of describing Western leadership as the bipolar, because he says mostly it's not bipolar, it's borderline personality disorders and inability to see subtleties in their behavior and in the international relations and military and what have you. And this is very much true. And here's my, so to speak, correction which I'm issuing. And but let's get to the neck of the woods, so to speak, and talk about what kind of bullshit and baloney is being splashed constantly on unsuspecting lay people, not obviously discounting the fact that those people in the West, and especially in their military, political, and other basically positions of power and control of the states, primarily United States, the rest of it, they don't control anything, they just basically lapdogs. We have to understand that they are incompetent, and I mean incompetent to the level of I wouldn't even suspect or assume even 5 years ago. Now I can tell you immediately, even if one considers that the only thing West is good at is PR and virtual reality creation, you have to really question not only their capabilities and qualifications of people who are at the top. We all know they are incompetent, but you have to start thinking about what those people who are basically pretending to be some kind of the analysts, let alone this famous, and very popular, very fashioned, so to speak, and vogue word or scene, which is open source intelligence. And let's get to it. So I will start with our favorite neocon, basically hawkish bullshitters from The Hill. And The Hill, and written by somebody who is called, well, doesn't matter who is written it. The Hill reports that Russia is planning a major offensive. Here's what that might look like. So they come up with this headline, which is probably true. Again, as I stated, Russians will do as they deem necessary, and if it could be just whatever major offensive, or it could be basically continuation of the annihilation of the Ukrainian troops along the whole line of the contact in Ukraine, which is about 850 miles. And then, of course, there are about 50,000 of them concentrated in Seversk. So Russians have some job to do, so to speak, of annihilating those 50,000. So, but The Hill goes further and begins to describe how they think what it looks like. So, and they obviously, as normal for any basically American journal, most of them anyway, they base their assumptions and PR on their bullshit which is being fed to them from Kiev and Kiev regime. But so they, over the weekend, the Institute for the Study of War, and here immediately, red flags. neocon organization, Mr. Keen, Mr. Patriots, and bunch of the lapdogs and the Kagan family who run this operation. And obviously they don't study any war there. They're basically PR corporation, which is obviously has zero understanding of the modern warfare, including those generals, American generals, who are known to be losers. They lost everything there is to lose militarily. So I don't know. Patriots probably or Keen wouldn't be able to command a battalion in Russian armed forces. So, but hey, here they are, you know, those guys. And so they are planning a major push in the next 6 months to regain the initiative and end Ukraine current string of operational successes. So, I mean, you need to start questioning the qualifications of those people. And this is exactly what I'm doing. I don't think so, as I already stated, those people understand modern warfare. And to understand why I say this, I will show you this a little bit later, but here it is. There is a guy there who basically the lead of this, you know, Russian department, so to speak, in this funny institute, which is the fraud, academic and military, obviously. But his name is George Barras, a Russian researcher at Institute of the Study of War, told The Hill that he has seen build-up of Russian forces in Lugansk. Russians are sending up for decisive effort in Lugansk, he said, and blah, 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 blah. Basically, this is what they do. They do their selling of the obvious platitudes, basically. So, and everybody were talking about this offensive for a while, including people who do have military qualifications, such as Douglas McGregor, and other people spoke about it. And as I already stated, yeah, it's probably will happen, but let's get back to a little bit before we go into the Mr. Barras curriculum vitae and his experiences as the military analyst. Let's go to Mr. Latif, the general, 20 years in DARPA and PhD in physics. And I reiterated, I showed it before. And here's Mr. Latif quote directly. Much of what the public knows or thinks about the military derives from entertainment. Every year, movies romanticizing the military and conflict are produced and released to captivate audiences. They generally represent only one side of a conflict and glorify war. They depict unerringly accurate weapons, as do video games, and the morality and righteousness of our cause. Often, in attempts to dramatize, movie makers get things wrong. More than once, I had to explain to a senior decision maker that the limitations of orbital mechanics make it impossible to fly a satellite to an area of interest to take a picture. Serious scholarly books are written about war and its consequences, but the vast majority of the public ignores them. So, this public, majority of this public, is primarily 99.9% of American so-called journalist corps and all those fraudster organizations known as the think tanks, which basically sell bullshit under the auspices and under the cover, so to speak, of the military expertise. And again, Institute for the Study of War and this Kagan operation is one of them. Those people who know shit from Shinola when we talk about the modern warfare. And I don't know how, you know, they just hire those generals just for the sake of, you know, creating a little bit of brand. And then you have the bullshit, which is being presented as the fact or as some kind insight by people. Let's take a look to Mr. Barras, who is obviously the guy who leads the Russian team in this institute. Well, let's take a look who he is. Let's open that thing. Okay, here's Mr. Barras. He graduated William and Mary bachelor's degree International Relations and Russian and Post-Soviet Studies. So basically, he graduated the field in the United States and in the West, which is academic fraud and the wasteland, because there are no serious scholars on the international relations currently in the West, well, except for some alternative guys who try to make living, trying to, you know, express the proper opinions about this. But then again, and post-Soviet studies is absolute crap. And to give you understanding that what he did, his practice was primarily in Ukraine and in Kyrgyzstan. in Kyrgyzstan. So as you might understand, the guy has a very specific approach to Russian history and Russian studies. And guess what? His main work under the undergraduate research assistant was research assistant at the Department of Russian and Post-Soviet Study for the Russian Movie Theater Project. One has to state, like, what? What did he do? And here it is. Here is the guy. Look at this. He explains his qualifications as such. Undergraduate research assistant. His translation, transcription, XML markup. Well, for people who know what the scripting language is, what and XML is one of those, whatever. Just, I'm not gonna comment on this. And data analysis of Russian oral history interviews conducted by William and Mary students in the former Soviet Union to examine the former Soviet movie-going populations, construction of memory concerning their experiences at the movies. Conducted and filmed several oral history interviews with subjects in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan in summer 2018. And primarily the guy was into some kind of media. And when you begin to look at this, well, guys, this is the guy, as primarily 90% of the American, so to speak, scholarship or academy, which comments on Russia. So the guy has no clue in anything, but yet he comments because he saw, slightly more, so larger number of the APCs or maybe tanks in some area, and he said, oh yeah, they're gonna create, this or start this offensive. This is the level, guys. The guy, as I already stated, he has qualifications for the, as I already stated, either the comment section in the tabloid or maybe to Pornhub. I mean, there are people I heard that which basically leave comments there. So there you go. That's the level. And this is the guy who commands the, what's the name of it, Russian sector, so to speak, in the Institute of the Study of War. So you can imagine, apart from the malice which those people constantly have, and their task is not to report reality, their task is to create bullshit alternative reality. But if you look attentively, these are the type of people who deal with this. And so, yeah, about this, offensive, but it's not just, doesn't stop there. We continue. Even after the Hill offensive, suddenly we have these guys. Oh my God, they say that Business Insider, that's another sewer, basically populated by clowns like Michael Peck and other, basically, I don't know, trash people who consider themselves journalists. Look at this. So here's another headline. Russian troops are tied down in Ukraine, but some of its best subs are still holding the U.S. at risk, top U.S. commanders say. And so this Christopher Woody, so that's another story in itself, talks about the submarines are a relative bright spot in Russia's recent naval modernization efforts, especially the Severodvinsk class subs that U.S. officials say are hard to detect and capable of striking important targets in Europe and the U.S. It's obviously, it's difficult to expect from this dude from Business Insider, and look at his biography now and curriculum vitae, who has bachelor's of arts in international global studies. And again, you have to understand, this is the fraudulent, these are fraudulent degrees. These are people who basically, it's vocational schools for people who couldn't get into the serious universities and especially serious STEM and military studies, but so they go and study international global studies, which in the United States primarily 90% of the time are taught by clueless people with the same degrees, basically, who don't understand and don't know shit from Shinola. And so here's the guy who begins to wax strategic and tries to describe the Russian modernization effort in the Navy. I spoke about the Navy before. I will be speaking about Russian Navy more. And it's not relatively bright spot, it is a revolution in terms of weapons which are being carried. And as my last video described, you can see yourself that even Chinese Navy, which has a very weak nuclear powered submarines component, still can freaking sink like a lot of U.S. Navy, if not the most of its surface assets, in case of real war. Russia is overwhelmingly dominant over China in terms of their submarine component. They are both state-of-the-art and carry weapons China still doesn't procure. And as a result, so here it is, they talk about this Russia tied and Russia is losing, this ridiculous narrative, but that's what they are. That's what the only basically qualifications they have to create alternative reality and sell bullshit. And doesn't stop there. We can go and further, and we suddenly get into the basically the not only Russian subs. We can go to the this thing which is absolutely magnificent. Magnificent, I'm being facetious. It is the same like the sun is hot, water is wet, and this is the level of degree of the expertise, quote unquote, which basically being peddled to already bordering on the hysteria of the majority of the Western population. The Barents Observer, oh yes, those wonderful people with the pretty much special services all over from NATO, they begin to write this shit. And here, just think about it. Poseidon nuclear torpedo tested in Arctic water is primarily a psychological weapon, expert says. No shit, pardon my French. Actually, every single strategic nuclear weapon is primarily a psychological weapon, and we, of course, know it all as a deterrent. Those weapons are created preferably not to be used ever. But look at who this expert is. And I have to admit, now if there are any feminists around, hanging around my videos, please leave, because now you will be really triggered. But here it is. Here's the this expert. Drop that gorgeous girl. You know, she should have been in the Top Gun Maverick instead of Jennifer Connelly. And she is, her name is Ina Host Pedersen Kwan. She delivered the platitudes and self-evident truth. And they basically begin to explain who she is. She is a wonderfully beautiful woman, obviously smart, and she graduated from the University of Bergen in 2018 with Master of Arts in Comparative Politics, specializing in Russian maritime defense planning and the implications for Norwegian maritime strategy. Here's another expert, guys. Here's another wonderful human being who thinks that basically selling platitudes and self-obvious things will create some kind of, I don't know, the environment which will explain to people what it is. Well, I think so. You can find even the bomb in somewhere, I don't know, San Jose, where they are in Seattle, and, and you can explain on fingers what deterrent is. And you can demonstrate it to him even using the human interactions, let alone, explanation of the nuclear weapons. But yes, Poseidon is a psychological weaponry, meant to be not used, and God save us all if it is going to be used. But hey, that's what passes today as the expertise. And these are just 3 examples of people who have no clue what they're talking about. They graduated with those fake degrees in the comparative politics, in the international relations, with the political science, or mostly primarily media people who are good at writing all kinds of bullshit which higher ups tell them to write. And here is the situation. We have now this, again, the hysteria, apart from basically decision to use some Russian assets, which are stolen by the West, which is normal. I mean, primarily Western elites are thieves and people without morals and ethics. But apart from that, there is another thing and they need to be seen as doing something. Let's send not 50, let's send 100 Bradleys. Let's send 100 M113, those tin cans, which are not survivable even in the moderately, low intensity conflict, but they need to be seen as doing something. And this talk about Patriot is going on and on and on. It's actually, if you look at Answer when the first time it appears, it's now in several months. We can send this, thing like, Patriot, and it's and Kirby, our sensitive and emotional admiral with degree in public relations, only in the United States, I guess, he spoke yesterday about the fact that, we understand that this is not going to change that much, but let's go back to the issue of the Patriot. And the news of the day, the news of the last year, actually, and many people, especially on the American side, even people like Douglas McGregor, they have to live with this, that we saw in the last 11 months. So we saw a complete failure of American and NATO weapon systems. They performed dismally in real combat conditions, but Patriot is the one which is actually has a long history of being, well, let's put it mildly, underperforming. In reality, it's a dismal failure, and even though some improvements can be incorporated both in the radar and signal processing and launch data development contour. Now, after the Aramco situation, which was 2 years ago, you remember Houthi drones and some old, Scud type whatever missiles just blew the hell out of Aramco, which was guided by the Patriot Pack 3, which is Patriot Advanced Capabilities 3, the latest version, manned by the American crews. They couldn't stop it, and the record of the failures of Patriot continues unabated. It just doesn't work, especially doesn't work against low-flying target, and its only good use for Patriot is obviously the medium range, medium height flying aircraft. Yeah, that it will shoot down. But as Ukraine already showed, there's something wrong with air defense of the NATO in general and United States in particular, especially when we saw yet another failure, which is now, have you heard recently anything about the NASAMS, which was supposed to be so, oh my God, net-centric type system? You can see very many videos of those NASAMS flying into the night, hitting nothing, or hitting the apartment blocks in Kiev or wherever they were. So they just do not work. And let me show you something which is normal people and professionals, when they talk about it, have to keep in mind, or as my friend Larry Johnson wrote yesterday in one of his wonderful posting about this, he said probably Russians are very delighted that that kind of weapons like, Patriot will get there, because Russians first, they might get it, as such, or if one begins to think about what Vladimir Putin stated 2 days ago, 2 days or maybe yesterday, in the last 48 hours, when speaking to Obukhov plant in St. Petersburg and basically marking the end of the siege of Leningrad, he spoke very clearly that Russia produces 3 times more air defense missiles than the whole, United States. Not to speak of the fact that Russia produces missiles more than all NATO or all combined West combined. So that gives you a little bit of the numbers. So that is why he was very clear that Russia will not run out of the missiles, which he was doing since March 2022. But let me talk more about the obviously Patriot. And as even historical data suggests, I'm not saying that you have to take it completely, as the truth. Enough to remember, for example, Lieutenant Schulte's paper for the wonderful book by late Captain Hughes about the missile paradigm in naval warfare. He was doing basically only the Exocet and type similar missiles data from the British-Argentinian complex around Falklands, and obviously during the escort operations in the Persian Gulf. But that wasn't enough still, and it was again based primarily on the subsonic and Exocet type missiles, or what it could be conditional Exocet. Obviously the situation, for example, with the Russian missiles is completely different, and as already practice showed, they work. And not only they work damn well. And here we have the situation that even if you take the let's say declared or more or less adjusted probabilities of the Patriot single missile intercepting the target, what we would get here would be this type of the basically capability, which is, if you look attentively, the probability of the kill, which we want to have a very decent probability of 0.95, and if the missile is about 0.5 probability of the intercept by single missile, you will need about 4.3 missiles. That means actually the whole damn launcher package from a single launcher, which are 4 missiles traditionally, which you will have to shoot at something which is Patriot never encountered in its practice ever. And I'm talking about modern Russian missiles, low-flying stealthy cruise missiles such as X-101 or 3M14. But again, when you have even these guys, and these are really, really funny people, it's the, the drive, again, military pop porn, so to speak, and even they have to say that missile defense madness, myth of perfect patriots, magic thought, and the ICBM shield, and they destroyed, basically, that's primarily all bullshit. They will not intercept much to start with. So, and when you have even these amateurs basically talking about the fact that, yeah, let's cut the crap, and it was in November 18, 2020, this article that the Patriot, we don't know. Some people say that actual probability of a single missile, especially if you talk about the configuration of the salvo, which Russians will gladly oblige to create to basically annihilate Patriot or whatever other air defense complex. And Mr. Kirby saying that, oh yeah, it's not enough. Of course it's not enough. Even 20 of them is not enough. But point is that you can have all kinds of the configurations, and do not forget that a Patriot also is dependent on what is called the zone, the sector responsibility of air defense, which is usually provided by the Aegis type cruiser or Erebor class destroyers, which have to have the link with Patriots. Well, it doesn't work, obviously, because it's nice only when you look at it on paper, but obviously as live shot it doesn't. But even if we consider the actual historic so to speak, documents, if you wish, and actual historical data, we can very reliably assume, and again, I'm giving you the front end of the calculations, that the basically back end is a completely different story. You need to graduate military academies, all kinds of the update courses as an officer to understand this. But look at this. The reality is, we even for this probability of the kill of 0.95, in order to intercept anything like single missile or single Garand, which are very stealthy because they're made out of composites and very not well reflected on the radar screen, even with the modern signal processing. So you will have about, what, 0.35, and when you calculate, you need to understand that to shoot down the single missile, you will need approximately, well, let's put it this way, seven missiles. Granted that you can launch them simultaneously, because we are looking at the things which are not correlated in terms of the probabilities. Reality, of course, that those calculations are much more complex, but this is to give you a degree of the orientation in the spatial and time picture of the battle, and obviously Russians do not shoot 1-2 missiles. The last, I believe, launch, what I don't remember, it was like a week ago or something like that. There was a like 65 or 68 cruise missiles alone. So, I mean, basically, no American or NATO air defense system, especially in this type of environment, which will be also spoofing GPS, it will be spoofing there, and it's going to be extremely electronic warfare dense environment. So, yeah, basically, the time of survivability or the lifetime expectancy for this complex, like Patriot, let alone, especially when Russians using their famous X-31, excellent performance, anti-radiation missile, and all kinds of those Lancets and things like that, which fly for hundreds of kilometers. I don't know what they're hoping for. Yeah, they will take this basically Patriot and stick it in the middle of the living quarters somewhere in Kiev and hope that it will shoot down something. NASAMS obviously performed dismally, as was expected, and then you have this, and these are just basic numbers. We obviously can sit here and calculate the force required and probabilities all we want, but the situation this morning is such that basically Russians already took 4 villages and towns in Zaporozhye, and yeah, that's gonna continue. Will it be like, oh yeah, this is pronounced, pincer movements of the offenses, or will it continue to be the grind, which it has been before? It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The numbers which are streaming right now in terms of the Ukrainian and a lot of NATO people, casualties are horrifying. I mean, it's absolutely horrifying. And just watch now the next, basically, step in the drama around Seversk, where those 50,000 will be isolated and annihilated. Whoever will be able to surrender, I don't know. But we'll see. Anyhow, this is my talk to you today, guys. And as always, those who like what I do, please support me on Patreon and Buy Me Jack. And subscribe to my channel. And as always, my profound gratitude to my supporters and people who support me both morally and financially. It is important, believe me. I'm just the only guy, you know, who sits here and tries to make sense out of all that. So, and no, that we will see again. Just read my lips. There will be a lot of chest stomping and hysteria in Western media because the West has essentially already lost the war. Well, it lost it before, but I mean, yeah, don't read all those experts. Most of them, 99% of them, are full of shit, amateurs who are capable only, as I already started, leave the comments in the under the Pornhub videos. So this is my talk for you for today, and I'll see you guys later. Have a nice rest of your week. Bye-bye.